Hello, my name's Philippa Waller.
My name is Penelope Waller, and we are two of the directors at 4D Human Being.
And welcome to the 4D Human Being podcast. What's it all about, Pen?
It's all about your personal and professional relationships. It's about your communication skills, how you lead, how you work and build teams, how you are looking after yourself and your well-being, and how you are much more at choice. What do we mean by that?
Well, sometimes we can get a little caught in patterns in life and we can all be a little bit on our automatic pilot. So 4D Human Being is all about helping us get back to choice and being a four-dimensional human being. And your fourth dimension, of course,
is intention. So whether it's about your impact, your leadership style, your team dynamics, whether it's about your well-being, whether it's about your communication or your presentation skills, anything that involves human beings interacting with other human beings, 4D Human Being are here to help.
we're going to take a deep dive and look at some tools, insights, theories that are going to help you go from a 3D human doing to a 4D human being so that you can happen to the world rather than the world simply happening to you. Well, hello and good morning.
Hello, good morning. What a treat.
What a treat. Penelope, would you like to explain why it's a Thursday treat?
Well, usually, Phil, you and I are recording a podcast together. We're often together. We have the amazing Matt Beresford with us today.
We have the global, worldwide, incredible, world-class Matt Beresford with us. I know.
Sorry, you'll make me blush. Blush. Here we are. Delighted to be with you. I'm sorry I couldn't come and squeeze into your sauna pen with you. I'm very pleased. I'm very pleased to be here.
I've got to rebrand my working space.
Yes. Unless we use it, I'm all about using moments of mistake. We've been talking about this. I'll give an example of it in a minute, but and sort of piggybacking them and marketing them. So my mind immediately goes to, could we film a podcast in a sauna?
Oh, hang on. Where are we going with this?
Yes, actually, this came up on a conversation with our marketing team, and we were talking about a restaurant that limits how long you can be in there with your laptop open, having one coffee over 3 hours, and starting to set a barrier and say, no, I'm sorry, you can't stay any longer. Rather than, £10 for a sandwich and a coffee, and you can have as much coffee as you like, free refills for the rest. Like, how do you make the fact that someone's in your cafe work for you as opposed to get out of my cafe? Anyway, there we go. So a podcast in a sauna is my yes and on that.
I'm not doing a podcast in a sauna.
Well, I tell you what, if I super segue, Laura, rack me up one of your nice jingles there. If I super segue that. There are occasions where, because today we're going to talk about the importance of voice, but there are, of course, occasions where there will be visuals that will absolutely override any level of audio that people will want to watch, and not necessarily for the right reasons, let's be clear.
What? Not necessarily.
What are you planting in the listeners' brains?
Well, today we're talking about voice and the power and the importance of voice. And as I came onto the podcast, I was thinking many things, of course, but one that, of course, we're going to talk about this in the context of leadership in the workplace and being a colleague and presenting and holding meetings and inspiring vision. But of course, it's so hugely important in our personal lives as well, isn't it? With our partners and our friends and our family. And it's probably something we don't think about a lot of the time. We're just using the voice that we've sort of adapted along the way. But it will be having a huge impact, and it may well be the difference between whether you get your way on the family holiday or someone else. But it's true, isn't it? It has a huge influence.
Yeah, it does. I think in our personal lives, I don't know how intentional many of us are about our voice all of the time, but I think certainly with our in our personal lives, probably less so. I'm sure we've all had that discussion with our partners where our partner says, yes, but it's the way you said it. That's a nice opening up of a discussion around voice.
Exactly. When we say don't talk to me like that, we probably mean more the tone, don't we?
Yeah, we don't necessarily mean the words.
Yeah.
Well, I remember having some conversations with some friends and a long time ago, and both of us had broken up with partners, and we were relaying messages that our things that our exes had said to us, and of course to the other person it sounded perfectly reasonable, but of course you're reading into the tonality all sorts of things. So I think, like you say, Phil, I think, and Matt, I think often we can think about the words that we say and the language that we use, and of course that's hugely, hugely important, of course, and we are reading the tonality of the voice. We're reading so much into it.
Yeah.
But it's our 4D2C model, as always. We're very focused on the intellectual. When people are planning, difficult conversations, they will very often go over in their head, what am I going to say? How am I going to begin this? The physical impact of the voices we're going to talk about in terms of the energy and the pace, and then also, of course, the emotional impact that we have both in the tone of our voice. Those things are so important.
Hugely important. And I'm afraid there may even be an argument. I mean, you can't have no substance, but in terms of style over substance, it probably leans more towards a balance of the two than we think. I was looking back over the Moravian study, for anybody who does or doesn't know that. It was so often quoted through the sort of, 80s and 90s. It was a piece of research by the psychologist Moravian in the 60s, 70s, and really got traction. One of those little psychology sound bites that was so taken out of context and then blown up. And the research said that only 7% of your words count. It's 40% of tonality, and it's whatever the rest of it is. You work it out, 40% or so left. 50% is how you show up, the physical impact of you. That's your influence. Now, we know that when you pick apart the research, it just all sort of slightly falls apart, because as we all know, if someone shouts "there's a fire," we're very focused on those words, So
yeah, and I think, like you said, it's been interpreted out of context in terms of how those stats are used. Yeah.
But what is useful about it, and what I think, if this had been extrapolated, then Moravian's sort of theory may not have sort of quite crumbled so much, is that actually it's much more of a balance between the two than we realise. How we interpret meaning and how we interpret trust and fellowship and leadership is so about the quality of the voice, because two of your leaders could say, come with me, I'm going to, we've got a bright future. And if one is, a sort of resonant, strong voice, we'll talk about those qualities of voice that you can really quickly use. And one goes, oh, it's going to be really good. Definitely follow me. And one is sort of high pitched and fast. And so that, clearly we're going to have more faith and trust in the different voice, but the words are the same. So that's the useful.
And there is a very, very good reason for that. I mean, if you think about, almost sort of pre-language, or certainly when languages were developing, and certainly when we were tribal in relatively small tribes, you didn't have a lot to go on in terms of the actual words and understanding.
It's a bit like being on holiday now, isn't it, abroad?
Yeah, you're just trying to interpret from physical signals and from the tonality of the voice. And of course, lots of the way that we interpret data in terms of the oldest part of our brain, that's still operating like that. It's desperately trying to understand things without necessarily being able to quickly interpret all of the words that we hear.
Well, Matt, that makes me think of the gibberish game in improv.
Oh, I don't know that one.
So we used to do scenes, like you'd get a setup. So you're in a doctor's surgery or something, patient and doctor, and you'd have to do the scene in gibberish. And of course, the audience would fall about laughing, because you can read so much in terms of tonality, and vocal tonality and sound, that you don't have the words, but you know exactly what's happening in the scene.
And didn't you? I know you spent a long,
I thought you were going to say, Ben, don't you talk gibberish?
I know. I saved that kind of comment for when we're actually in the room. I was thinking about, isn't there quite a famous Italian song from the 90s where some Italian singers, like they wanted to mimic what an English pop song sounded like. And so they created a song. It's complete gibberish, but to Italian ears, it sounds like English. Andy, you'll have to get you to find that.
I did not know that. I'm going to look that up.
Of course, Italy, like a lot of European countries, absolutely swamped with British and American pop music through the 80s, 90s and noughties. And I think they thought, we want some of this action. No one understands what any of the words mean anyway. Let's just make it sound English. So, I think it was quite a hit.
That's so funny.
I just wanted to pick up on something you said about leadership as well, Phil, because I think, for us as Brits, and of course, our frames of reference around leaders tend to be Brits and Americans, of course, because of the shared language. But I mean, you can just think about some of those great leaders down the years, whether it's Obama, whether it's Churchill, whether it's Thatcher. Maybe we'll talk about Thatcher. Regardless of what we think about their politics, these very strong leaders, and a huge amount is about the distinctiveness and the power of their voice. Mm-hmm. And I think about this a lot in relation to, of course, the work that we do, but also sporting captains. And there, there's been a few England cricket captains and England football captains and rugby captains where I think, well, I think I know why people aren't really following them. And it's not because they're not great cricketers or have not tactically strong, not very good players. Their voices are awful. Their voices are not the voices of leaders. And I think it's really, really undervalued. So it's a great topic for us to talk about today.
Yeah, I totally agree. And actually, it's a really quick way to shift your communication quite dramatically, because we have a lot of tools in our toolbox around how you show up, how you communicate, how you manage yourself, how you internally sort of think and deal with moments of conflict or your ego. Like we've got lots of great tools, your energy, your intention. The voice tools are so tangible. Over the next 2 podcasts, we're going to look at 4 tools, if you like, things you can do with your voice that are so quick, and that's pace, pause, precision, and pitch. So pace, how fast you talk. Pause, literally, do you pause or do you just go like a train and not stop talking? Precision, so do you waffle, filler words, or are you just very clear and precise? And pitch, which is huge, of course, the range of your voice. And I think you're absolutely right, Matt. I think people hugely underestimate voice. It's one of those pieces that when we have space to put it into our training programs, people go, oh my goodness, like I'd never really thought about it. But it's something that I think people can very easily go, oh no, we won't have we won't look at that. We won't have time. And it's a very, very quick, very, very strong impact on how you're going to show up. And I think exactly as you say, I think the temptation for us is to go back to our script and what we're going to say, and we really, really believe that is going to make 100% of the difference. And it's like a shift in mindset to really help people understand and believe that if you change some of these dynamics, it's probably going to do more for you than getting that question right. And it's quite a difficult mindset shift, isn't it?
It is. I mean, I would build on that. Starting with the belief, as you said, Phil, is already quite a challenge. I think the second challenge is how much we identify with our voice, and that we think changing elements of that, it's not us. And also when you do start working on voice with people, and we ask people to record themselves and video and then watch it back, it's quite strange for people because it's unfamiliar to hear your voice using your external sort of audio.
Yeah, because you hear it through your own head. Yeah, exactly.
So there's quite a few things around it that can mean that it can be quite difficult for people to want to step in and work with it, because A, as you said, they don't necessarily believe it's going to be the big thing, and B, when they do, when we ask them to do it, it's a little bit uncomfortable to do it.
It's just like, I mean, I don't think any of us mirror our cameras when we're on a Teams call or a Zoom call like this. And why don't we do that? Maybe we should do that, because then I would be able to see what I know Phil and Pen can see now. But we don't do it because it's so unfamiliar to us. We just want to look back at the same image we see when we're looking in the mirror, and it is exactly the same. And it's not that face is unusual; like that's the face everyone sees all of the time, and that is the voice everyone sees all the time. We're just not used to looking at and hearing it, and it's that unfamiliarity, it's that discomfort which I think you're right, Pen. I think it makes us sometimes just want to shy away from it. And if I don't ever have to hear my voice, then it's all right. And the one thing I always say to people about this work is, my voice, just like everyone else's, used to sound to me completely different from the outside to inside. Now I hear myself recorded so often because of this work, it sounds identical. My brain has now melded these two together. I don't hear any difference now whatsoever.
Yeah, so I agree.
You have to go through a bit of a journey for that.
Yeah,
but it really is worth it if you want to work on it.
Yeah, the wall of fire. It reminds me of, I was thinking about, Matt, our work in theatre, and when I went to the RADA, the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art, and trained as an actor, it took me quite a long time. I think it was like the end of my first year, where my voice, it started to really be connected to my diaphragm. And I remember the moment, I remember the day, and we were doing this exercise with sort of throwing a ball, and this voice came out of me, and it almost sent me reeling backwards. And my voice teacher said, that's it, you've connected. And I went, oh my goodness, I can't talk like that. I felt like I sounded like this sort of bear, or like, more like a man. Because it had such a deeper resonance. And it took me a while to almost accept, exactly as you say. I didn't identify with the sound that had come out. But that was the connected voice. And of course it opened up the range. But the other thing about drama school, which I think about now, was when I first went, I was like, why have we got so many voice lessons every week? What is this voice? I want to have more acting classes.
I want to put on a costume.
I want to put on a costume and do some Shakespeare. And we had so much voice. It was almost daily. And we had it in small groups of 3. We were split out. It was so intense. But of course, I very quickly understood that you could look great and you can know Shakespeare inside out, but you're going to have a fairly narrow career if you just, you know how to move and you know how to look good, or you know how to, express emotions with your face. If your voice can't carry the character in the story, if we think about theatre, film, radio, audiobooks, I mean, you just suddenly go, oh yes, it's voice. It's voice. That's what it is. That's what we're buying into when we go to the theatre or listen to a book or podcasts. I mean, podcasts. Look what's happened with our media now. It's all audio.
Yeah, and many of the most successful podcasters, their voice has a tremendous part to play in that. Yeah. Whether it's, I don't know, Sam Harris is very popular. I listen to The Rest is History a lot. Yeah. The two contrasting voices, and they're very distinctive voices. It is remarkable, actually, how much podcasting has led to a sort of renaissance in the power of the spoken voice. Yeah. So it never goes away, but it becomes more and more important again.
Well, you know this more than any of us, Matt. I mean, you are, our lovely colleague Emma is a voiceover artist herself, an absolute expert in voice. As Philippa said, the opportunities to use voice in terms of our career, whether that is in the acting profession or in leadership or, speaking, development, is absolutely enormous. It's just enormous.
Yeah, it's huge. And, increasingly, we talk to clients about using video rather than just relying on email, particularly if they're talking to their teams, delivering a message. And and I think the voice is a major part of that. People want to hear from their leaders rather than just read a long email on a Friday afternoon, I think.
Well, basically, it's nearly 100 years later from the talkies, from the jazz singer. And we're having our own sort of, it's like the renaissance of that time, isn't it? Because that completely made and broke a lot of careers. There were actors and actresses that suddenly just looked amazing in the silent movies. And then they went to talk and it was just so grating or ghastly. Their careers went. And I think, there's sort of an equivalent now, that there's so much communication now via audio, being invited onto podcasts, etc., that you can't get away from it now if you want to be in any position of influence. So let's quickly just talk about, I want to do a very quick, how is the voice produced? And the voice is produced with our breath into our lungs, which the more breath you can get into your lungs and diaphragm, of course, the stronger your voice is going to be. That's your foundation of your house. The air goes up through your vocal cords vibrate, and then depending on the amount of space you then give your mouth, think about, I don't know, people like Prince Charles or singers like Mariah Carey, if you think about how much space you give the doorway to your voice, that's also going to have a big impact. So you can think about those three pieces. The amount of breath you take in the foundation, the air going up through your vocal cords. Now, depending on how fast or slow your vocal cords vibrate, so if they vibrate fast, you'll get high pitch. If they vibrate slower, you will get a lower pitch, and you can train that. And then finally, and again, really simple thing to do, open your mouth more. I mean, it's such a simple thing to do. And when I taught it, I went back and taught at RADA, I could get very, very quick results from students just by telling them to open their mouth sort of almost 3 times as big as they thought they should. And suddenly you've got this cave that's resonating the sound as it comes out. So there's really quick things you can do. So that's how your voice is produced. So get more breath in your body. And we'll talk about pitch and range in terms of those vocal cords, and open your mouth more. So you can immediately do 2 things that are going to do so much for your voice.
I say a couple of things on those, Phil. One, in terms of the opening of the mouth, because what that does exactly as you say, in terms of the amount of sound that comes out. But also, we lip read so much more than we realise that we do. And so I will often talk to people who are speaking in very large rooms, that the why, not to a very, very exaggerated degree, but the more they can accentuate what they are saying, the easier it will be for the audience to lip read and therefore hear. So it's not just about does the sound kind of hit the back of the room. It is also, can people see what you are saying with your mouth? It makes a much bigger difference than people realize. And the other thing, maybe we'll talk about this at some point, but is how we get that breath in our body. And as you say, taking a big breath is really, really important. There is some complexity around where the support, where that breath sits. But the less tension we've got kind of around our chest and around our shoulders, the more we can fill our lungs and give that diaphragm kind of space to move and work. So I think those 2 things can make a big difference too.
Yes, well, we've got to cheat on that as well, haven't we? That having done sort of 3 years of vocal training at drama school, a really quick way to try to get your diaphragm doing more, because with most of us chest breathe, is to actively keep your shoulders down. So you're just reducing the chances that you're going to chest breathe, because when you chest breathe, that tends to be where your chest will puff out, your shoulders will go up. So you can actually think about pulling your shoulders down, and in a way you're kind of pushing that air into your diaphragm. So there's lots of cheats you can do to try to get those other parts of your anatomy working harder. Yeah, totally.
It's a really good sort of reference there in terms of the connection between our physical selves, the production and tonality of the voice, and then the emotional selves, which all fits into our 4-dimension 2 context model. But people do often say to me that they don't feel nervous, they don't think they're nervous, they don't feel nervous, but something happens to their voice. And it may not be that they're nervous, or they may not be consciously nervous, but if something's happening to your body, it is going to impact the feel, the production and the tonality of your voice. So it's all completely interlinked, and which is why we always go back to all of those 4 dimensions, particularly thinking about the physical as the foundation. And for anybody who sort of thinks I'm a good speaker, it's not important, I would just re-emphasize again how important it is in terms of all of those dimensions to produce your voice. And that if you think, even if you don't feel nervous and you feel you're fine, if you think about presentations that you've been to see, your brain is picking up all of those tiny physical and tonality signals that you're getting from that person on the stage and just making huge assumptions about them. So it's definitely worth working on.
It's an interesting one that just makes me think, Pen, and we can sort of talk to nerves and emotion here, because of course the voice, as we've just described, the voice is produced physically. And I don't know if we always think about it like that. I think we think about it as a kind of, if anything, I guess a sort of, maybe it's just a mechanical tool to convey our intellectual thoughts. But it is it's coming from the physical dimension, and it has an emotional impact. And yes, it's carrying the words, but really that's the last bit, isn't it? It's coming from the physical. We can talk gibberish and still have an emotional impact. And it's only the last bit which is actually the words. But I remember, and we were all there talking at a very, very dear friend and colleague's funeral, and I could feel it as I stood up. I could feel the emotion completely overwhelm me. And I could feel it physically. And I think, and it took me, I thought, I'm not going to be able to talk. I'm not going to be able to talk. And I'm sure lots of people have had this experience for, maybe not at a funeral or memorial service, but even just the nerves of presenting. And of course, because I've done so much public speaking, on some level, the unconscious kicked in, and I just knew, firstly, I knew I just had to start, but I knew I just had to ground myself physically. That actually trying to manage yourself emotionally in those moments, actually, the chances are you're going to start escalating because you start thinking about the person, or you're thinking about the speech and will people like it? And that's all in the emotional dimension. Are they going to like me? Am I going to do well? Will I, how will they feel? How will I feel? What's going to be the judgment? Will I remember my words? All of that, you're just stirring the pot. Whereas if you think all I've got to do is anchor down, breathe in, and get my feet on the ground. That's all I can do right now, is anchor this rock and start. And that is going to do a lot more for you because it's physically produced.
Yeah. And actually, in many ways, they're very simple things to do. You know, to think about what's going on with your, as you say, with the grounding of your legs and your feet. And if you're, I think in that service you had a lectern in front of you as well. I remember. So I'm guessing you probably would have held that to some degree to sort of anchor yourself there as well. They're actually very simple things to do, rather than, as you say, suddenly you're dashing through, remembering everything, or in a very emotionally heightened place like that. Am I going to do justice to what I wanted to do? Am I going to remember everything? Am I going to be okay?
Go back to the basics. So very quickly, there's a couple of things on why is it important to think about your voice. Well, I love that bit of research on, if you're watching a video online or whatever and the audio is terrible but the picture is great, you probably won't last very long.
Yeah. And
it's like buying, if you've ever bought an audiobook and you haven't sampled it, and then you've bought it, and then you start, I can't listen to this voice for 10 hours. That's absolutely no way. Has a huge impact. Whereas if we watch a video where the visual's not great, but the audio is strong, it's definitely got a bias. We want the audio. I'd rather my microphone kept working and my slides went down than my microphone stopped working and my slides were good.
And I think, maybe this is just a personal view. I don't know any research on this, but I think the new generations are doubling down on this because they are multitasking all the time. They'll have really poor quality videos on YouTube, etc., because they're listening to it and they're not really watching all of it. They'll just keep flicking in occasionally to get little bits of it. But the audio's got to be good because they're only having one audio stream at one time. They're having a lot of visual streams at one time. So they are doubling, tripling down on how important this is.
I think it's the age of the audio, because I've just been listening to it. I've just been literally listening to a podcast about the fact of how streaming and TV shows, there's a new thing called, is it Tubi, where they play old episodes of things, because what they know is you've just got to get people engaged with the channel. It's not really about what the content's going to be, because what they do is they press play and they're just listening as they're going about the house.
They're scrolling on, I was going to say Instagram, but my kids would say that's for old people. They're scrolling on TikTok while they've got Netflix on. Yeah. So they're watching multiple things at any one time.
Or they're listening, actually.
But they're generally, they've only got one audio on, but they've got multiple visuals. Yeah. Maybe that's just my teenage. But I think I do that as well, actually. I think I do multi-visuals. So hugely important.
Yeah, so the visual is now just colour. It's just like colour background to the thing we're actually listening to. It's interesting. Okay, so let's talk about two of the aspects. So over the next two podcasts, we're going to talk about pace, pause, pitch and precision. And today we're going to talk about pause and pace, which I would argue, unless you've got a really high pitched voice, I would argue pause and pace are your two quickest ins, your two quickest ways to make a huge difference in your voice and the impact that you have. And thinking about this professionally and personally, if you think about having an argument or giving instructions to a partner or a teenage child, the pace that you're talking is going to have a huge impact on them physiologically. Come on, get on with it. I want you to tidy your room. Why don't you tidy? If we talk really fast, we're immediately doing something that is not getting us in empathetic sort of alignment with them, we're immediately, it's almost like picking them up and shaking them with our voice, isn't it? So pace and pause. So should we start with pace? And let's think about maybe thinking about what we mean by those dynamics and what we can do and what we've seen that's really worked with people that we've worked with. So the pace, why is pace important? What do we mean?
I mean, I think with all of these factors, actually, with everything we talk about 4D, there is a sweet spot. And there is a sweet spot depending on the audience, depending on the message. And it's not that we should always speak slowly, and it's not that we should always speak faster. When we do work on this in the room, we very often talk to people and get them to explore what's it like when you talk really, really quickly. And that tends to be energizing. There tends to be enthusiasm and passion and these kinds of things that come out when someone is speaking very, very fast. In fact, I was talking to a coaching client about this yesterday. And then we get people to play with speaking very slowly. And great, we can understand everything that is said, and it can carry greater authority, maybe greater gravitas. And then at certain levels, again, depending on the message, it can get a bit boring. It can get a bit annoying. It can get, kind of get to the point. So there's always this sweet spot, as I think as we'll say through many of these pieces on voice, as we say through many things in total. The ideal is, have we got a range? Can we access these different parts of our voice depending on the impact we want to have on the audience, depending on the message that we want to deliver.
And what is the intention in any one moment? Sorry, Pen, I just make you think, what's the intention? And that's always the piece we come back to, isn't it? Like the 4D, like what are you actually trying to do here? And that's different from the pattern that you've got as a baseline. And we need to understand our baseline to start with so that we know where we're moving from. And the baseline will be set by how you've been conditioned in terms of growing up. And that's either because you've melded and molded into the kind of family or unit that you've been brought up in, or you've had a complete, sometimes we might have a complete opposite response to it. But one of the things about voice is that it can help us belong. So we'll tend to, we all adapt our voices slightly when we're with different people. We used to notice with our mother, we sort of knew which friend she was talking to on the phone because her voice would just change slightly. So we could usually guess, and we do that all the time. So we need to know what our baseline is so that we can then shift it, so that we're clear about the intention, exactly as you say, so that we know that okay, I normally talk very quickly because I'm very energized and very passionate, and that's the kind of background I've come from. But actually in this context, and I've seen it with a client, I've seen it with many clients, where they literally hit a career ceiling because their default is super energized and super fast. And it's worked really well for them up to a management level because they've got people going, but they until they understand that they haven't got the gravitas, they haven't got the calm. I can take this ship through a really difficult waters. I can really guide us through onto a long-term timeline. I've got other people who can get you, sort of energized and doing the tasks. I'm going to really anchor in the vision, and understanding that it's the way that they're communicating that is actually going to break them through the ceiling. It's such a mindset shift when you've been used to success through speed.
Yeah, well, I would I was going to sort of make the same point about that intentionality, and I would really emphasise the piece around identity, which we hear often in the room, don't we, Matt, around authenticity. And of course we can really identify with our voice and how it sounds to us inside our own heads. And exactly as you said, Phil, our voices are developed and built up in terms of all of these elements based on what we've inherited genetically, but also based on how we've been conditioned. So, we came from quite a large family, quite noisy at dinner time, all quite energised sisters. So we do tend to speak quite quickly because that's what worked for us in terms of belonging, being heard, being seen, etc., etc. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just to be aware that your voice patterns are exactly that. They are patterns that you have inherited and learned that have served you in the dynamic in which you've been brought up. And you have a lot more range than the narrow set of patterns that you have identified with. So it's not that it's not your voice, it's just the part of your voice that has not been developed and managed and used as much. So this is why we always come back to intention. I have this set of patterns in my voice that's worked quite well, and if my intention is this, how can I stretch into that range a little bit differently? So it's there to have a play with, however unfamiliar it feels.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think recording is our friend there. It really is, because not only does the tone of our voice, the pitch of our voice sound different from inside to outside, the speed does too. And people find it remarkable, I think, when they've recorded themselves speaking at a pace that they felt was horribly slow inside. And we will often ask their colleagues, when we're doing a masterclass session at the end of a longer training program, was that too fast? Was it too slow? And it's never as slow as it feels like it is for you if you are very energized and very passionate speakers. So for many of these things, recording is your friend, and pace is definitely one of them.
Yeah, absolutely. So a quick tip on pace. Firstly, on a really basic level, and as Matt said, record yourself. And if you can, play it to somebody who knows you very well, but also someone who doesn't know you very well, because always that kind of issue with feedback is when we start to play with some of these dynamics, people really close to us will often say, oh, that's not you. That's not you, because we like things how they are. But once you kind of think, well, actually, I think my voice can get fast. Either I speak very quickly or I speak very slowly, or in these situations or with these people, I can sometimes, so maybe sometimes it might be with authority, I can find myself speeding up. And what that can start signaling is, oh, I don't want to take up too much of your time. I'm not as important as you. Please just, know that I'm really, really trying to not waste your time. And which of course we're not thinking about as our voice speeds up. But that's partly what's potentially, not always, it depends on the context. If we're, I don't know, with family, friends, or making a joke down the pub, or playing, entertaining kids at a party, that vocal speed might be absolutely right, come on, we're all going to go. It's context. But if you kind of know, all right, I think this is where my voice is or where it can go, then practice literally dialing up the pace by 2 or dialing down the pace by 2, and as in your next meeting, and as Matt said, or at home, and as Matt said, this can feel so extreme to us, and I speak as somebody with a fast voice, and training as a psychotherapist, it felt like somebody was dragging me back by heavy ropes, because it was such a big shift for me to slow down. But, most therapy clients don't need you going, no, go. It's going to be think about nurses and panic attacks. Like you want
the calm. And also, because of how a lot of us are wired, we will be thinking about the volume of information that we want to relay to whoever is sitting in front of us. And of course, I cannot say how many times we've heard about presentations and meetings that are, I've got a 20-minute slot, or the person before ran over by 5 minutes, or whatever it might be. The time element is so prevalent in presentations. So people tend to speed up because they're like, I've got 30 slides, I've got to get through it all, I've got to hear it all, I'll just talk quicker. And that's what happens. They've got to hear it all, don't they, Matt?
Yeah, it is so tempting. It is so tempting. And, I think we will often reflect with delegates at the beginning of a training program how much of a presentation that you saw, for example, last week, do you remember? And people, when they reflect on that, they think, well, do you know what? I remember one thing that was said, maybe a single statistic. And so when we're thinking then about, right, your 20-minute presentation has now been cut to 15, what choices do I have? Well, you could try and squeeze 20 minutes into 15, or you could think about what are the big 3 things I want this person to walk away.
Down,
Remember, and slow down. We haven't talked that much yet on in terms of people who might want to shift the other way. Actually, you mentioned it just briefly there, Phil, and that is important. If you get feedback that, or you feel that you want to be more energizing, you want to come across, you want your voice to match the passion that you have for a project, then one very simple thing to do is to increase the speed of your voice, so that it, as well as your physicality, can demonstrate the passion that you have and the enthusiasm that you have. It's actually a very, very quick way of doing that.
Yes. And actually that is a really nice tie-in for next week as well with pitch, because if you've got a slow voice with a monotone pitch, that is going to be problematic, because our ears and brain will start to switch off. And actually, Matt, to really build on what you just said, with all of this, we want variety, because whether it's the language that we use or the way that we talk, if we keep doing things in the same way, eventually our brains, our lovely human brains, as opposed to our hamster brains, are designed to start switching off and cutting out things that we've heard before. So variety is the key here, isn't it?
Yeah, very much so.
So the second one, which is a good tie-in actually, and it's almost like another way in to pace.
I do have to mention here, Phil, how beautifully you have alliterated these 4 points. The puh is also a wonderful sort of vocal
plosive
impact.
Yeah, the puh.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Well, actually, that's another thing. We do talk about this. I don't know if this is in this campaign, but I remember talking to some participants in a course over in Germany years ago about vowels versus consonants. And of course, again, at drama school, what you learn is, and Shakespeare's like one of the easiest ways to learn this, is that the feeling is carried on the vowel, and that's about the openness of the sound. So Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou? Romeo. It's so vowely, it's open. And the sense is carried on the consonant, so sort of sergeant majors in the army, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right. It's much more consonant based. So it's another really good way, though, to think about how you speak and how you speak to people that you love. Because if you're all consonanty, well, you shouldn't have said that, and it's all tight and consonanty, then you've really taken out the emotion. You're in instructions. You're veering towards the army officer who's trying to get somebody to do something or understand something.
Is this why every Italian word ends in a vowel?
Well, that is interesting, because we work a lot, of course, with people who are speaking English as a second language. We work internationally a lot, and particularly with Spanish speakers and Italian speakers and Portuguese speakers. And I will very often have conversations with Spanish speakers speaking English, because Spanish is a quick language. And maybe one of the reasons it's a quick language is because it's so vowel heavy. And the challenge then, when you're speaking a choppier language like English or German or Dutch or Scandinavian language, you can lose some clarity. There's this, wonderful emotion, but the speed, allied with maybe not hitting every consonant, can mean it's more difficult for people to follow exactly what you've said. And it's tough for people, because English, for most, the international language of business tends to be English, but it is something that's worth bearing in mind when we're speaking English.
It's absolutely spot on. And I love French. And when I was learning French, equally, initially, and I feel this with Italian, it's this rolling sound, and you're sort of looking for you're looking for the markers of when one word finishes and one begins. And what's so interesting about that also is when it works the other way. And there are other accents that I've come across in business and coaching people. And quite often it will be a similar country where somebody says, I just find that person so too direct. And I'm like, this is interesting, because this crops up a lot with these particular countries, and it's much more about the sound of the voice. And I know exactly what they mean because of where you come from. So it works the other way, that if you're coming from a place that has a more that spacious vowel where we're giving some space, and yes, the directives and the meaning will come, but it's really about how we feel. Let's go and have a 2-hour lunch.
I don't think that happens anymore.
I don't happens anymore. But so when you hear those more clipped sounds, of course, it really jars, because
and vice versa as well.
Exactly. So it's hugely important. Anyway, I love that. But when we were talking to the participants of this course in the room, of course, we ended up talking about how you talk to your teenagers, and when they're in a space of I don't want to, and it's very vowel, it's very feeling, it's very I'm just feeling, Mom, I don't want to, and it's in this vowel space. And of course, where you can be tempted to come in to get something done is go, well, you've got to get on with it, and you go into the clip. And if you think about that in terms of relationship, you're completely out of sync with the other person. So, you know, we were kind of going, you know, actually, what would it be like to go, oh, yes, what if? You know, what if you met them with the sound, even if your sense is trying to do something different?
You got to pull some strong intention out of the bag sometimes to get there.
Well, you know, that's the challenge. If you can influence that, you can influence anything. Okay, so there's a little side to it, but I do think it was fascinating. So the pause. This is probably top of the top list, isn't it? The pause. So let's talk about the pause. Why is it important? When should we use it? What is the impact?
Oh, we love the pause, don't we? We love the pause. This is another one. I'll let Matt talk about, you know, why it's important and when we should use it. This is another one that we use a lot in the room in lots of different areas, not just when we're doing voice work. We use it a lot in various areas. How different the length of the pause sounds inside your head versus how other people are experiencing it. It's quite extraordinary, and we've spoken on other podcasts about how time works in our brain, and maybe we'll come back to that on sort of later topics. But the sort of internal clock is actually quite different to the external clock. So it's quite remarkable, again going back to the recording, Matt, how different that can feel, and you think you're doing it and you're not doing it. You're not doing the pausing. It's amazing, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it has so many applications. I think, firstly, if we speak very quickly and we are struggling to slow down, a pause can be a quick way of changing things up. So if you know you're someone that speaks really quickly, simply adding in a few pauses, allowing the audience time to catch up, just to understand and take in your words, like that's a kind of really useful baseline technique. When we're presenting, the impact of a pause is so powerful. One, it slows you down, it gives you time to think, it gives time for your thoughts to land, all of those things. It also says to the audience, I am in charge here. And when I am ready to speak again, I will continue. And it's such a power move, whether we're in a meeting or whether we're delivering a presentation. And I don't mean that in a kind of manipulative, puffing oneself up way. I just mean what I have to say is really important. And now I'm ready to move on to my next point. And
confidence.
Now I'm ready. It's confidence. It really says confidence. It's the reverse of what you were talking earlier on, Phil, where someone's speaking really, really quickly because I just need to get through it all. And really what I've got to say is not very, very important. So you don't need to worry. It's the reverse of that. It is saying you will wait to hear what I have to say. And the other application I love it for, and Penn's the master of this, is kind of negotiation and challenging conversations. It is leaving space. You know, good salespeople are very often taught, you know, do not be the next person to talk. Here is the price, or here is the offer. Done. Say nothing else and leave that space. And will the other person fill the pause? So it's a tremendously powerful technique. It's not easy for all, but I don't find it easy at all. I'm desperate to fill the space with my voice. But it's super powerful.
I really hear you on that, and I resonate with what you just said, Matt, about, you know, you almost like the body's pulling you to fill the space. But what's interesting about that, to practice that, is it made me think, as you said it, that to pause and all of that nervous energy that would normally spill out of your mouth, just breathe, just almost like, you know, those snow globes that, you know, everything, when you shake them and the snow goes up and down, just keep it inside you. It might be buzzing away, but just keep breathing and just think, I'm just going to keep this in the snow globe. Usually I open my mouth and let this nervous energy out and start talking, but it's almost like using it like a little practice.
You are masterful with the analogies, Phil. I'm taking the snow globe analogy into our voice and pause work. Because, of course, the other thing it keeps inside the snow globe, as it will now be known, is all the fillers that tend to get pushed out when we think, well, I've got to keep talking. And we go, right, yeah, you know, and all of that can go with a pause. I've seen people in 2 takes of a video, when they put the pause in, 100% of the fillers disappear. And that makes a huge difference as well in terms of your impact and how you come across. So yeah, the snow globe, Phil. Keep it all in the snow globe.
I think for those of us who are extroverted, and I think maybe Phil, you and me are more similar in that regard. You know, the feeling of wanting to fill the space, and that comes from a good place, and sometimes it doesn't serve us so well. Talking to think. these things are all very present for people who are more extroverted. And so it takes time and it takes effort. But when we can do it, it's so powerful. And I often talk about the Better Call Saul, anyone who's listening who's seen that show. And there's one very, very menacing character called Lalo, drug dealer. I'm not suggesting him as a great role model, but there's some wonderful scenes where he doesn't say anything. He just pauses and he breathes and he looks, and the other characters are dashing around him in total panic. And it's an extreme version, but a really good one, of the power of pausing and being still and saying nothing. And on a micro limit, when we are in difficult conversations or we're presenting or we're trying to land our point, it's super powerful.
It's got huge status, isn't it? It's making me think, because I'm like you, Matt, I love history. And if you imagine a sort of, I don't know, King Henry VIII just staring at you from his throne and pausing, like the amount of power in that, in that status. One thing that makes me I know we're sort of nearing the end, but one way, if you do have that extrovert energy that wants to talk, wants to fill the space, is to use the body and sit back, because it's really going to help you. Because when our body goes forward, our voice follows, it comes out. So that's something I use a lot, because my body gets pulled forward. And remember, your voice is physical, so it's going to follow the physical and then it's going to come out. So use your body to take that just a little bit off of the center line, off of the vertical, back into your chair or whatever, or back onto your back foot, and it'll help you to reduce the need to talk.
I love the other tip that you give as well, Phil, which is the just taking a couple of seconds before you speak. And not only does it have all the benefits that we've just talked about, I would offer it also adds weight to what you will say next. You're going to bring people in. And that's the other way, one of the other benefits of pausing in the middle of a presentation or a speech. Around your pause, both what you've said before and what you're going to say next is just heightened for the audience. Absolutely. They're going to just be listening that little bit more. Yeah. So it's such a powerful tool.
So can you dial down or up your pace in your next meeting? And can you take 2 seconds, second and a half, 2 seconds to pause? Remember Penelope's advice, it's going to sound longer in your head than it does in other people's. So pausing before and after. So we wish you well on the first half of your 4D voice journey. Do not underestimate it. Use it at home. If you've got a debate about what you're doing for Christmas, can't believe we're talking about Christmas. Think about the pace and the pause as you have your conversation, and just see what it does. You have your own voice laboratory, and just see whether it has an impact before you launch into all your wonderful points about why you should definitely go to your own family for Christmas.
Yeah. Looking forward to the next 2 Ps, Phil.
The next 2 Ps, so pitch and precision. So in the words of Churchill, I'm sorry I wrote you such a long letter. I didn't have time to write a short one. I really, really understand that, because when I leave voice messages for, some of our team, I think, could have said that much shorter. But if you don't prep it and plan it a little bit, it's easier just to keep rambling. So we're going to look at precision, because precision is the gift that you can just give everybody. And I'm going to definitely be doing more of that. So we're going to look at pitch and precision, how you can use your pitch, really important in terms of how the other person is hearing you. So we're going to talk about pitch and precision. We will see you next time. In the meantime, dramatic pause. Have a really, really great couple of weeks. Thank you to Matt. Thank you to Pen. What a joy. Let's do it again.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the 4D Human Being podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show.
Do take on board some of the insights, tools and tips, because every time that you try something new to get back to choice, you are making a vote for the you that you want to become. And I love that phrase, Pen.
I do too. And please do share this episode with somebody that you know would really benefit from the lessons and learnings we've been chatting about today.
And of course, if you're interested in more from 4D Human Being,
do get in touch. We run workshops, trainings, online, in-person, conference events and keynotes. We've got the 4D on-demand platform for your whole organisation. And we do have a free Essentials membership where anybody can sign up for absolutely free to access some of our insights, tools and tips. So do get in touch with us if you'd like to hear more. We cannot wait to hear from you and to carry on the conversation.